I contemplate the moment in the garden, the idea of allowing your own crucifixion.
This critical race theory infused way of looking at things, where people who are like Mitt Romney are on top and everybody else is laboring on the bottom like slave oarsmen in some ship a very long time ago, and that our notion of identity has to be about defining ourselves against the white hegemon, and the idea that we're supposed to go back to thinking of ourselves as stamped by what our racial membership is in exactly the way that old time Southerners wished that black people would. The whole dialogue is something that enlightened people are going to have to learn how to stand down.
The human being, unlike the rest of the animal kingdom, we have a spirit, we have a will, we have a capacity to make ourselves. We can be self-critical. We can, notwithstanding the givens, which are our historical inheritance, whether it be genes or some kind of socio-political structure, nevertheless will ourselves to be differently in the world than what has been the case. We can be better. And I say that not just for individuals, and this is really the point that the other second point I want to make. I say it for communities, the collectivity. We have a collective consciousness, a kind of cultural orientation, which we can influence with our literature, with our politics, with our public life. We can teach our children differently. We can hold up ideals. They can be reflected in our journalism and in our art and in our social life. There's a better and a worse way of living. We can say to the gangbangers who are killing each other on the streets of Chicago like crazy. Last weekend was a horrible weekend. We can say to them, be better. We mean that you can live differently than what you're living. And we can hold that up as an ideal. A good Black person would not live like this, would not neglect to take care of their children, would make the best out of their opportunities. Sloth is bad. Self-pity is bad. Live a life of dignity. But if you embrace this predeterminism, whether it be a genetic or a cultural, historical predeterminism, you say all the outcomes are already fixed. You make it almost impossible for a community to marshal its moral resources on behalf of teaching its members what it means to live rightly and to live well. It's a demoralization. It's a fundamental demoralization to take these predetermined positions, it seems to me. So,
do the people who were protesting in Los Angeles, peacefully and violently, do the people who were ransacking and burning businesses by the hundreds, in many cases businesses that will not return to their neighborhoods, do the people who caused so much damage to the city, do any of these people know that 2019 was the 30-year low for police shootings in Los Angeles? The police use more deadly force against white people, both in terms of absolute numbers and in terms of their contribution to crime and violence in our society. But the public perception is, of course, completely different. Justice requires contact with reality. It simply isn't the case. It cannot be the case that the most pressing claims on our sense of justice need come from those who claim to be most offended by conversation itself. Your capacity to be offended isn't something that I or anyone else needs to respect. Your capacity to be offended isn't something that you should respect. In fact, it's something that you should be on your guard for. Perhaps more than any other property of your mind, this feeling can mislead you. If you care about justice, and you absolutely should, you should care about facts and the ability to discuss them openly. The general hysteria that the cult of wokeness has produced, I think this is all extremely harmful to civil society and to effective liberal politics and to the welfare of African Americans. I mean, the New York Times in recent days seems to be preparing for a full self-immolation What's happening is that no one wants to say or even think anything that makes anyone uncomfortable. Certainly not anyone who has more wokeness points than they do. It's just become too dangerous. I mean, there are people being fired for tweeting "All Lives Matter." Hashtag "All Lives Matter" in the current environment is being read as a naked declaration of white supremacy. Right? That's how weird this moment is. A soccer player on the LA Galaxy was fired for something his wife tweeted. Right? The perception that the color of a person's skin, or even his life experience, matters for this discussion is a pernicious illusion. Yet for the discussion we really need to have, the color of a person's skin, and even his life experience, simply does not matter. It cannot matter. We have to break the spell that the politics of identity has cast over everything. The more progress we make on issues of race, the less racism there will be to find, and the more likely we'll be to find ourselves merely chasing after its ghost. And the truth is, we have made considerable progress on the problem of racism in America. And this isn't 1920, and it isn't 1960. We had a 2-term black president. We have black congressmen and women. We have black mayors and black chiefs of police. There are major cities, like Detroit and Atlanta, going on their 5th or 6th consecutive black mayor. Having more black people in positions of real power in what is still a majority white society is progress on the problem of racism. And just ask yourself, what would real progress on the problem of racism look like? What would utter progress look like? Well, here's what I think it would look like. More and more people, and ultimately all people, would care less and less, and ultimately not at all, about race. As I've said in various places, skin color would become like hair color in its political and moral significance, which is to say it would have none. Now, maybe you don't agree with that aspiration. Maybe you think that tribalism based on skin color can't be outgrown, or shouldn't be outgrown. Well, if you think that, I'm afraid I don't know what to say to you.
What they want is for it to be made easier for black people to become rocket scientists by getting rid of all of the really tough math. And I'm not exaggerating. You can actually hear people saying these sorts of things, as I have walking next to them. You can read people saying things like this. There are tenured and hot-shot black professors who stand up in front of august bodies of people saying that it's racist to expect black scholars to be mathematically competent. And I'm not exaggerating.
I contemplate the moment in the garden, the idea of allowing your own crucifixion.